All right, let's get to the other big game this coming Saturday. Just a little two schools called Bama-LSU. You know it is a weird year and a fun year in the SEC when Alabama-LSU is the undercard or the game that is not as marquee in the SEC. Very interesting line. Alabama is a 13.5-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook, the over-under 56. Both these teams coming off a bye. Alabama, of course, 3 weeks ago lost to Tennessee, takes care of Mississippi State before they get their bye. LSU looking awesome in the two games before their bye. 45 points against Florida in a win, 45 points against Ole Miss in a win. That was, of course, Ole Miss's only loss this season. When I look at this game, though, there is something that does stand out to me, and that's this. Have we gone a little overboard on the Alabama concern? And what I mean by that is this. Listen, and by the way, if you listen to this show, if you listen to the Aaron Torres pod, we've talked a lot about it. We've talked about Alabama. They're not the same team on the road. Nick Saban has called out their fiery, competitive nature. Are they fiery enough? Are they that team? Previous Alabama teams had that. Does this group have that? But I also think like people are just kind of burying Alabama, right? And what stands out to me is this. Yes, they lost to Tennessee. No, they have not looked great on the road. But first of all, I would say this. The Texas game is ancient history. And yes, they could have lost that Texas game. The Arkansas game, they were rolling. They were rolling past Arkansas until Bryce Young got hurt. Then the Tennessee game happens. And I want you to just, I want you to do the old A Time to Kill. If you remember A Time to Kill, the movie, Matthew McConaughey says, I want you to close your eyes and picture something. Now, that was much more serious than this. But I bring it up because I want you to close your eyes and I want to just talk you through Alabama, Tennessee, okay? And by the way, if you're driving, please don't close your eyes, but you get the hypothetical. Alabama against Tennessee, this is what happened. They gave up 21 first quarter points. They muffed a punt, which led to a score for Tennessee. They actually outgained Tennessee. People don't realize this. The offense outgained Tennessee. And on top of all of that, they had the ball late, driving, in control, and Bill O'Brien, over 10 play calls 9 passes. They don't run out the clock. They don't make the field goal. Tennessee gets the ball back. 2 plays later, they're in field goal range. They kick the field goal to win the game. And so why I bring it up is because I just want you to think about all that stuff. 21 first quarter points, muffed punt. They outgained Tennessee. They had the ball. And in a worst case scenario, they should have been kicking a field goal as time expired to potentially win the game and then go to overtime. And despite all that, they lost on a last-second field goal to Tennessee. And so it's easy to bury Alabama, but I just sit there and say, I don't know. Are we sure this team is that bad? On top of it, on the offensive side of the ball, you don't need me to tell you, but this will be the healthiest that Bryce Young has been in a month and a half since the start of that Arkansas game when he was playing some of his best football of the season. I thought the wide receivers have really developed nicely, even though it's been a little bit under discussed. Jahmyr Gibbs is who he is. And here's the other thing with Alabama, which I thought was interesting. So Alabama's another one. We just talked about it with Georgia. Oh, Georgia's defense took a major step back. Well, Alabama, I think we all kind of think Alabama's defense, like something's not right. They're not very good. Here's the facts. Are they not that good? Or do you just remember that one game against Tennessee where Tennessee just went bonkers on them? And maybe too a little bit of the Texas game when Quinn Ewers was in. But with no disrespect to Jaden Daniels, he is not Quinn Ewers and he is definitely not Hendon Hooker. And I went back and just for fun, I crunched the numbers for Alabama if they had never played Tennessee. In other words, the 7 games outside of Tennessee where they're playing maybe the best offense in college football. If they didn't play Tennessee, or if Tennessee just was later on in the schedule or whatever, and I know it's the 3rd Saturday in October every year, I get that. Alabama right now would rank number 4 in the country in scoring defense, giving up just 11.6 points per game. That would be number 4 in the country, behind only Illinois, Georgia, and Michigan. And if you took out the yardage that Tennessee was able to put up against them, now keep in mind, everybody puts up yards against Tennessee. They would be number 4 in the country, behind only Illinois, Boise, and Michigan. Ahead of Georgia, by the way. And so I bring it up because is Alabama that bad? Or is it just possible that Tennessee is really, really, really good? And despite everything that happened in that game, Alabama still was in position to win. Now, from the LSU perspective, I'll say this, and I joked about it in my picks column at Aaron Torres Online. Anybody who listens to this show, or certainly the Aaron Torres pod, knows I love me some Brian Kelly. I've told the story many times, but he came to Cincinnati kind of as I was leaving UConn. I had seen the Cincinnati program be really successful under Mark D'Antonio. Mark D'Antonio leaves. Brian Kelly comes in, and it's like a rocket ship straight to the moon. He leaves, goes to Notre Dame. All he does is win, beat everybody not named Alabama and Clemson. All he ever does is get criticized. So I love Brian Kelly. But even as somebody who loves Brian Kelly, even as somebody who, as I joked, I might end up on the Christmas card this year. I love Brian Kelly so much. Are we getting a little bit overboard on LSU? And it's kind of the opposite of Alabama. I think everybody overreacting to Alabama losing to a really good Tennessee team by 3 points at the final buzzer. What about the LSU perspective? Are we overreacting a bad Florida team? Florida's just bad. And then that Ole Miss game was awesome, but it was just one game. And when I look at LSU, a couple things stand out. One, what Brian Kelly is kind of doing, it shows how great of a coach he is. It's kind of smoke and mirrors, though. I hate to say it. It's kind of smoke and mirrors, though. I love Brian Kelly. I was going to say I'd give an Oregon to him. I don't know if I really would, but I love the man. But it is a little bit of smoke and mirrors. Here's the facts about LSU. Remember, last year, end of the season, LSU had 30-something scholarship players healthy enough for their bowl game. Even after the transfer portal where they took 20-plus kids, even after National Signing Day where they took another 15 or whatever, they're still at about 75, 76 scholarship players right now. So they are behind on bodies to begin with. They're playing 2 true freshmen on the offensive line. And so what Brian Kelly has done is incredible. I don't know if Alabama is the team, though, that you can keep this going against. And the other thing that really stands out about LSU right now, it does feel like they are a little bit over-reliant on Jaden Daniels, right? Like, again, this goes back to not just looking at a stat on a piece of paper, but actually going ahead and doing the deep dive. And so if you look at this offense and you see that LSU right now is currently in the top 40 or so in rushing offense, about 6th or 7th in the SEC. I think you sit there and say, oh, they have some nice balance. They're passing the ball. They're throwing the ball. Well, that's not really true. Here is the truth, is that Jaden Daniels is doing an awful lot for them. Jaden Daniels, their starting quarterback, not only completing 70% of his passes, 12 touchdowns, 1 interception, but he's also the leading rusher, 524 yards. And it does seem pretty clear that the last 2 weeks, when he has really gotten rolling running the ball, that is when LSU has had a ton of success. 3 weeks ago against Florida, 349 yards passing and right around 50 yards rushing. Last game against Ole Miss 2 weeks ago, 248 yards passing, 100-plus yards rushing. And so I do think LSU has some skill players on the outside. I don't know that those guys are in full stride and fully locked in with Jaden Daniels. This secondary is probably the best secondary that LSU will have faced maybe all season, maybe since the opening game against Florida State. Florida State's got a real secondary, but Florida's not good in the secondary. Ole Miss isn't good in the secondary. Tennessee is good, but I don't think Tennessee is playing at the level now that they weren't playing at that level that they are now when they played LSU. And so I look at this game and I'll just be honest. I know it's on the road. I know it's Alabama. I know Alabama has struggled on the road. I do think Alabama's the significantly better team. And like I said, I think what it really comes down to is just bodies. Young bodies for LSU, inexperienced bodies from different places. Alabama's just got a 2-deep full of dudes that were recruited as 4 and 5 stars, recruited to the SEC, have developed as such off of a bye to, remember, Nick Saban. I couldn't find the stat. I was looking for it. Nick Saban with more than 1 week to prepare. It's freaky. And so I do like Alabama. They're minus 13.5 on the road at LSU. I don't know if the score is something like 41-20 or something like that, but a fully healthy Bryce Young, I think it's bad news for everybody else.